Hey everybody, Miguel Dorati back here on the MMA Museum podcast, and I'm joined by a friend and cohort here, Jeremy Horn. Jeremy, obviously, a decorated veteran of more than 100 fights and stuff. And we're going to talk about the rules, the evolution of the rules in this sport of MMA and NHB to MMA with Jeremy. Jeremy, how you doing?
I'm doing well, man. Thanks for having me on the show again.
Yes, sir. Thank you for joining us now. Um, So let's start from the very beginning. You made your debut in like 1996, and there was still,
Yeah.
no gloves and headbutts and wild stuff there. What was the rules for that first fight that you had? Was it full no holds barred?
Yep. Yeah, it was full no holds barred NHB, they called it. So no biting, no eye gouging. And I think that might have been it. They might have restricted groin strikes, but I don't remember. Okay. Honestly, things like that were really not that big a deal. Biting and eye gouging could come into play, but a groin shot, that just wasn't something that a lot of people did. It was pretty not real common. So I don't remember if they outlawed it or not.
Well, I'll tell you, everybody remembers the famous Hackney Joe San.
Yeah, Joe San, yeah.
That's the fight that pretty much got the job done. It was a cringe moment. People were watching like that.
Well, and honestly, for that fight, I think that what he was grabbing his neck while he's punching him. But if Joe Hassan wasn't wearing a steel cup, I'm sure Hackney broke his hand doing that. That was terrible. I mean, I'm sure it hurt getting punched, but dude, I wouldn't want to punch somebody in a steel cup. That's crazy.
Yeah, they it's raw to me too. I don't know if Joe sounds one of those mixed characters too. I wonder if he did or said something to Hackney that got under his skin, because that's like an escalation move too.
Yeah, yeah, that's almost it's rubbing salt in the wound, that's for sure.
So, did you get headbutted? Did you get headbutted in your first fight?
No. I was actually thinking about it. I think I actually did do my first fight with Monty was with headbutts too, but yeah, it really never was a thing. As a grappler, I was always trying to get close to people, and I didn't want my head hanging out there. So again, it was kind of a non-issue. I did my very first opponent, Rick Gravison, who I ended up being real good friends with. He was my first opponent, and when I was trying to take him down, he ended up turning his back, and I headbutted him on the back. That's still one of my great points of pride.
And I see Rick on social media. He's still active out there, and it looks like he's more into powerlifting and bodybuilding.
Yeah, he's getting so strong, man. It's awesome.
Yeah.
He was always interested in strength. He was always a hard worker in the gym, but man, it looks like he dove all in. Man, watching him do some of that stuff is incredible.
So yeah, that's always good to catch up with some of those old names. So Gravison caught a headbutt. So now you said the headbutt didn't affect you, but what were your thoughts? Back in the old days, there's no time, no weight classes and stuff like that. You might wind up in the ring with a guy like Coleman,
Yeah.
and Mark Coleman were throwing some headbutts that were very serious. Even Gary Myers, who you did tangle with, maybe you didn't get him off on there, but the wrestlers liked it. What were your thoughts about facing them?
Well, I never really had much of a concern for it because I was always of the mindset of, as a grappler, I'm trying to get as close to you as I can. So if you're in my guard, I'm going to try to get a body lock on you and pull you in real close and get like ear to ear, and you can't headbutt me if I'm that close to you anyway. So I just, again, it all comes down to just being able to control the distance well, and headbutts are kind of a non-issue.
I think I know the way this one's going to go, because my next question for you is the time limit. Because the original UFCs were no time limit, and they just waited till the fight ended. And the time limit then, especially to a ground fighter back then, that maybe was more of a game changer for you.
Yeah, I definitely think so. It was, especially as the sport progresses more and more into the modern era, the strikers and the wrestlers, or the wrestler strikers, the guys that want to stay on their feet, they got better and better at understanding grappling and being able to stall and hold you at bay, getting better at stopping takedowns. So yeah, I mean, in a 5-minute round, you could easily take a minute to set up a takedown. And then if that guy can, resist that takedown for 30 seconds, and then on the ground, he can tangle you up and stall a minute. That's That's 2.5 minutes. That's half the round done. And then add fast stand-ups from the referees. Yeah, your ground fighters are really, really hindered badly by the modern rules. But yeah, I think the time limits were really, really damaging to the sport. But I kind of get it, because as a spectator sport, it was kind of a necessary evil. But as far as like the competitor side of things, it definitely hurt us and changed the sport, I think, for the worse.
It's very interesting too. Then now let's talk about the great divide between America and Japan, because in Japan they always allowed certain things that in America got banned right away, such as kicking a downed opponent. And
Yeah.
Japan has a different spin on it, where if the guy's down but he's in a defensive position, in the turtle with his feet up, in the guard, that the kick is allowed to the head. And we saw some early examples in them.
Yeah.
I think Ruben Asado got knocked out by Andre Pederneiras that way.
Yep.
And how big a game changer is that? If you remember too, the Vanderlei Silvas and the Ruas, they threw combinations that ended in foot stomps. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They got you down, and when you were down, it ended with them stomping on your head. That's a combination.
Yeah.
So very healthy stuff.
Yeah, that I think, again, it just, as they start taking those things away, it gets further and further away from like what a real fight is. I mean, I get it, it's a sport, but I have always trained with the mindset of like, this is a real fight. This is a self-defense scenario, and outside of weapons, everything is legal. So I've always trained myself, and I've always trained my guys like with the mindset and the mentality of like, you're going to defend yourself from everything. We're not going to use the rules to hide a bad shot. If you try to shoot and take somebody down and they sprawl on you, you better get ready to get kicked in the head, because they're going to step up. Do you remember Babalu and Brad Kohler?
Mm-hmm.
In WEF, or W, was it that WEF?
The
WFA, yeah. So like, I've always trained that way. I've never been kicked. I think the closest I came to somebody doing that was Gilbert Ivel in Pride. I was on my back and he tried jumping up and stomping on me. But again, if you're trained to deal with those things, and you're aware of them coming, they're not that big a deal. Now, if you're not well enough trained, I mean, if you're like an amateur or a new pro, and you're not ready for those things, they can be devastating. But again, I always trained everybody and made sure that they were ready for those things.
Yeah, but the best way to be ready is not get hit by him.
Yeah, exactly. Just expecting, if you take a bad shot and your opponent sprawls on you and you see him step back to kick you, you better roll over to the guard quick. You better get your head. You just it's not that complicated to do. You just got to be mentally prepared to do it. And now so many people are they're lazy. You can take a bad shot and sit there on all fours, and the guy's only going to try to punch you. That's just lazy.
Yeah. Now, what was your fate? So it sounds like you like the Japanese style rules, or at
absolutely.
Least...
Except I don't like the ring. I prefer the cage, but I prefer the Japanese rules. Yes, definitely.
Why do you prefer the cage?
Well, because as a grappler, it gives me an opportunity to, once I take somebody down, they can't scoot out under the ropes and get a restart.
Okay.
They're going to hit the cage and get pinned in. And
you'd rather make them work cage climbing and so. I mean, the cage climb, get your back to the cage and get yourself up is kind of everybody trains now. Is like you'd still rather deal with that than the corner of the ring.
Yeah, I never really had like, so much of it comes down to if you are training properly, I guess we'll say, and you're prepared for those different situations, they're not that hard to deal with. I don't know, man. I probably sound like a know-it-all, but yeah, I mean, I never had trouble with people trying to wall walk and get up. I was able to either follow them up and take them back down, or pull them away from the cage, turn them away from the cage, whatever. Just keep them on the ground. I never had much trouble with that.
Now let's talk about that, because you were a big part of Matt Hughes's training group and training people, and the cage was a big part of Matt's toolbox, because
absolutely,
he got people down in sometimes in the middle of the ring, and you could see his next thing would be to zero in on his corner and then drag the guy over there and then crunch him up against the cage.
Yep.
Get that crunching up against the cage is avoided in the ring. Now, as a bottom grappler, wouldn't you favor the ring for that, just for that position? Because a guy like guys
Well,
like that,
yes and no. But here's the thing, like, I'm kind of known, I guess, as being more of a guard guy, but I'm really not. I'm really more of, like, I never wrestled, but my mentality is much more that of a wrestler. I use my guard when I have to, but I want to be on top of you. So my guard is dedicated towards defending myself and reversing you and getting on top. And once I'm on top, I absolutely want the cage. I'm going to try to take people down and get on top of them. I've never been one to enjoy being on the bottom.
well, that's
But yeah,
one
you're
that
right. I mean, as a grappler that's more of a guard player and bottom player, then yeah, I mean, having the ropes to squirt out underneath when you need to reset the position a bit is worth it.
that changed for you though, because at the beginning of your career, you were more of a bottom guy. You I don't want to say you gave up the wrestling, but you kind of, you kind of weren't a wrestler. So
Right,
am
right.
I wrong?
Well, no, you're not wrong. I mean, my intent was always to be on top, but my skill set was just not good enough to get on top. But I always wanted to be on top. In a lot of my early fights, I took people down and I was on top of them. And I would work from the bottom if I had to, but my goal has always been from the bottom to sweep people, to get on top, or maybe get back to my feet, but that's rare. And the only submissions I ever got from the bottom were really when I couldn't get up because they're good wrestler and holding me down, or something just fell in my lap as I was trying to get a sweep or a reversal. Then I would it just falls in my lap. So
Okay.
yeah, I've always been, from the very beginning, my goal is get on top and make people suffer until they turn over and give me their back.
Now, in those early days, did you ever have a fight with a guy where he might have worn shoes or, you know, long pants or, sweatpants or, weird stuff like that? Are you happy that that stuff got uniformed out, or did that take away a little bit too, that kind of unpredictability?
Well, that took away a little bit of it, but yeah, I think that was probably for the best. If you have a sport where you can kick people in the face, shoes are probably not good. Um, you know, it's just not good, and I think the uniformity is good just because then everybody's got the same thing. If one guy's wearing gi pants, the other guy's wearing spandex shorts, it's uneven, right? And the guy wearing pants has the right to wear shorts, but you know, I prefer a little bit more uniform in that regard. Yeah, I think it's better. Just kind of evens the playing field for everybody a little bit more.
And once you add gloves, that comes into play in spades, because you got
Yeah,
to have the same gloves as your opponent, which was
right.
actually an
Yeah,
issue in a lot of those early days. But
yeah.
what,
So you remember seeing people show up to the fights with their own gloves
yeah,
and wanting to wear their own gloves. Yeah, that's
yeah, and let have Miguel check the gloves or have somebody check the gloves, and what are we actually checking for?
right. Yeah.
But let me ask you, what about the transition from no gloves to gloves? Is that, as a grappler, would you rather have a free hand completely, or?
Yes and no. I kind of go back and forth on that one. Certainly the glove makes it harder to grapple, makes it harder to grab. The certainly, like, the Pride gloves are bigger and bulkier and they were harder to get a grip on things. But just in general, yeah, gloves are harder for the grappler. It's easier for somebody to defend and hang on to when I'm trying to choke them. But at the same time, they do protect your hands, so you can punch more. But again, I was never really a big puncher. I'm going to punch you when I get to the mount, and then I don't have to hit very hard to split you open. I don't have to hit hard enough to endanger my hands. Um, and I was always trying to be more precise. I see a lot of guys now, they throw punches with just reckless abandon and really not a whole lot of focus on their punches. You see, that's kind of a tangent, but I'm really critical of the punching that I see in modern MMA for the most part. Guys just throw sloppy haymakers, and like if you throw a right hand at somebody, it should land with your knuckles like that. And you see punches all the time that land like that, right? Like, just because guys, they just, from their elbow down, they don't even pay attention to what they're doing. They just throw their arm out there at people. Yeah. So, but if you're a precise puncher, and I'm not a real hard puncher, and I would punch specifically with a purpose, then yeah, I'd prefer no gloves, which is kind of funny because now they're allowing bare knuckle boxing.
Yeah, and actually,
What's the difference between bare knuckle boxing and bare knuckle MMA?
I think actually that's what George Masvidal's group actually did, bare knuckle MMA. in one of the
Good,
southern.
good. I would like to see it go back. So the one thing I don't like about that, sorry, we're kind of bouncing all over to topics, but the bare knuckle boxing as a sport, I think, is also kind of goofy and chest thumping nonsense, but it's still not bare knuckle. Like, don't let them tape their hands, right? Just because your knuckles are clear, when you have your entire wrist covered into a cast, that's still not bare knuckle. The point of bare knuckle is you have to punch properly to avoid breaking your knuckles, breaking your hands, and hurting your wrists. When you allow them to tape their hands, it's still protecting their hands, allowing them to punch more recklessly. You really want to go call it bare knuckle, you can't, nothing below the elbow.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Let me take it back to another point you made about the sloppiness of the punches, and sometimes things that are being done deliberately to affect the judges. Boss Root mentioned, he will kill you with 2 knees. These like knee flurries with like 10, right, 12 knees are so ridiculous. It's another excessive, sloppy moment that goes down in modern MMA. If he's got you tied down and Boss hits you with 2 knees, that's all he needs.
Right. I mean, you're done.
I believe him.
Broken. Yeah, I agree. Same thing. Like, so a lot of guys at the gym, they want to train, and they're like, "Hey, we want to do MMA rounds." I'm like, well, okay, but you don't really need to, because doing MMA rounds should be a mental exercise to get comfortable in those positions with people punching you. So you don't have to punch very hard, right? So like if I'm grappling with somebody and I manage to get to the mount, do I need to punch you for both of us to acknowledge that I'm going to fuck you up now that I'm mounted on you? No, I don't need to punch you from there, as long as you treat it accordingly, and so do I. You should be holding on tight, panicking, freaking out, trying to get the hell out of there. And if you do that, if all of your grappling is done with the mindset of he might punch me at any moment, then you don't really find that many opportunities to hit people unless it's so obvious that it's unnecessary. Yeah. So the biggest reason for people to throw punches early on is just to get accustomed to it, to kind of start to develop some confidence in their grappling ability. Say, okay, yeah, this guy really can't hit me. And that's what guys see. You put on 2 guys, let guys put on gloves and do a couple of MMA rounds. You'll see boxing and then clinch work and then on the ground. And then you see a handful of little shots here and there, but really nothing big. If both guys are good grapplers, they're focused on grappling, improving their position, a shot here and there that's not really that meaningful until they get to some big position. Then do you really need to punch? Mm-hmm. Both guys know this is the end of the road. If I get mounted on you, if I get your back or something, that's a different story. So
now you made a point too about being prepared in the training that goes into it. You're a guy who's been to both extremes of the training. With the Milicic in the early days, it was rougher in the room than in the actual matches. And then is that necessary at some point? Like it's like because you want to transition to train smarter. Like if you're mounted, there's no need to knock the guy out, obviously. Right. But do you need to rough it up at some point? Does that separate some of the men from the boys?
A little bit, yeah. I don't think it's so much about separating people, but it is helpful. Again, it's more of a mental strength thing, right? So we could spar at 50%, and we're going to go a little slower, a little softer. If we both adhere to that same level of effort, then it should emulate what a fight would look like between us, right? If I'm twice as good as you and we both go 100%, I'm going to smoke you. If I'm twice as good as you and we're both going 50%, I'm still going to smoke you. It's just going to be much softer and smoother, right? So yeah, I mean, if we're training, then we're training. And yes, it is, again, it's a mental thing for me. Go hard every now and then to remind yourself and build confidence in your technique and know, yes, I can take that punch. Yes, I can deal with it at full speed and real close to full power, where I can work on moving and avoiding and dealing with that. But once you have the confidence and the faith in your technique that you can deal with that, then there's not really a whole lot of reason to continue going hard. Just do it every now and then, stay fresh, maybe do a round or two, I don't know, a week or whatever. I don't really have a timeline, but just enough to make sure that you stay mentally strong and confident. Because I see a lot of guys that spar pretty hard, but then they go into the ring and they're scared. They don't want to get hit. They don't look in the fight like they do in the ring or in the gym, because even though they're going hard in the gym, they're not confident in their technique. They're not confident in their defense. So it's still, I mean, what's the point of going hard if you're not building that confidence and faith in your technique?
Another big thing from the early days, and something that fighters just simply don't have to deal with now. Basically they start their first fight under amateur rules or whatever, but there's a commission there, and it's the unified rules, and they progress. And if they're an LFA or CFFC, and then they get to the UFC, it's always the same rules. You dealt with all right, we got a fight offer here, and it's like the first questions were like, ring or cage, and what are the rules?
Right. Yeah, that was always pretty unique.
And you fought under big rule, different rules at a really high level. Let's start with the rings rules, because you fought actually Randy Couture, among other people in rings, and that's an open hand rule with some rope escapes and things. Talk about what that did, what that does to your mindset, how you prepare for that.
Well, for me, again, it didn't really change much, because as primarily a grappler, my goal was always to take you down, get to a good position, make you give me what I want, and then submit you. And so, punching people, or really more accurately, the threat of punching somebody, is what elicits that response. And without that, I've got other options to work with. But I always tell people, one of my fight, one that sticks out in my memory was I fought a guy over in Holland named Khalid Arab. Do you remember him? Fought Pride a handful times. Another nasty Dutch kickboxing monster. Just a killer. And so I shoot in. I take him down. I get to the mount. I grab him by the neck and I cock back my hand and I punch him as hard as I can right in the face. And he didn't even blink. He literally didn't even close his eyes. Like, he just stared right at my fist coming right in his face. And I was like, well, I guess he doesn't care if he gets hit, But that's the thing. I mean, think about it. Sometimes you're punching people from the mount and your goal is to knock them out. But most of the time as a grappler, your goal is to make them roll over. Your goal is to make them react to the punches so that I can do that. It's not just to punch them and knock them out, and there's exceptions, but that was my thing. So if I can't punch you, okay, I'll just find another way to make you give me what I want.
Yeah. Now, in that case, in Holland, were elbows an option?
No, see, there was a lot of places that kind of followed the Japanese, or maybe started the Japanese mentality for the fight shows. There is, they didn't want you to do any elbows because they didn't want people to get cut. They didn't want a fight to get stopped by a cut. They weren't worried about people getting fucked up from elbows, but they want to see a good fight with a knockout, or a longer fight. So yeah, they didn't, a lot of times they didn't let you throw elbows.
Now let me I know we go back and forth here, but I think the conversation's flown pretty good. Can you use the gloves, especially older gloves, but even now, can you use, like, if you wanted to cut somebody with the gloves, is it easier?
I never could intentionally. I mean, every now and then you get laces on the edges of the gloves and you miss a punch and catch them with the laces, or not the laces, the stitching. That kind of thing would happen, but that was really kind of an accident. That's kind of like the way Kosaka cut Fedor. Like, that was an elbow, but same kind of thing. Like, just barely missing and barely grazing a shot is what cuts people. And if it's stitching on the edge of the glove, that's even more likely. And then the other option that's there, the other reason that's pretty high is scar tissue and real prominent facial features. Sharp cheekbones, sharp eyebrows. That kind of contributes to people getting cut a lot as well.
But don't you see people almost at times, like, it looks like a karate chop with the gloves, because they're not punching anymore. They're actually trying to use the edge of the glove.
Yeah, that could be. I mean, I don't see that too often. I see people mostly doing kind of a hammer fist just because they can't get a good angle to punch. They're just trying to generate more power. But yeah, I mean, that certainly is a way that you could get cut a little more easily.
Let's getting back to the ring zone. In rings, did you ever have an experience where you had a submission, the guy busted out with the rope escape on you?
No, because when I started my first fights in rings, they were kind of changing the rules. So rings, I'm sure you know this, you're familiar with everybody, but rings started out as kind of like almost more fixed fights like pro wrestling. And they had some that were kind of real, but a lot of them were, the 15-minute long battles where people are going to get 3 rope escapes each, and then somebody's going to win at the end. And they're all good. They're all good, skilled martial artists, but they were basically, kind of pretend fighting. And Rings decided, as Pride started getting better and MMA started picking up, Rings was like, hey, we want to jump on this bandwagon. We're going to do some real fights as well. So that was one of the things they got rid of right away was the rope escapes. A submission would end the fight, and so I
Okay.
never fought under the rope escape rules.
Okay. Now, how would you have? Did you not fight in Pancrase? Did Pancrase?
I had one fight in Pancrase. Same thing though. I fought on the first card when they were like, okay, we're going back to true NHB rules. They went back to gloves, but kicks and knees to the head on the ground, headbutts, elbows, the whole 9 yards. You could do everything except I think biting, eye gouging, and may again. I don't even remember groin strikes. That was really such a non-issue.
Yeah, and then hair pulling would be the other
Right.
one. That
Yeah, everybody had pretty short hair, so.
But the deal, well, how would you have felt with the rope escape? Like, would you feel like literally like, hey, I just went 3-0 in one fight, because the rope escape gives you like a bye.
Yeah, I did. Like, I think the rope escape is kind of a unique it's a unique idea. I like it as a sporting event. It makes it interesting because, then you could have, you screw up, the guy catches a submission on you and you grab a rope escape to get away. But then if he comes back and knocks you unconscious, you still lose the fight.
Yeah.
And in my eyes, I'm like, no, I won the fight because I got a submission on you a minute ago, but you got a rope escape, So I'm kind of torn. Like, again, I never fought under the rope escape rules, but I don't know that I would have liked it. Because when I go into a fight, like I want to finish. When I finish you, it's over. The fact that you could grab a rope and we keep fighting, you get another chance to maybe knock me out. I'm like, I'm not liking that.
Yeah, and I think that also contributed a little bit to some of those Japanese guys with like 500 records, but like 80 fights, 90 fights, where they're phenomenal. They're just simply skill wise, they're really good. But they may have had a win, lost. They go back and forth.
Right.
Those and they add to experience because it's almost like a couple of fights in a day.
Yeah. Well, and the Japanese, I don't know if they're still doing it this way, but back when I was fighting in rings, I went and stayed in Japan for a month here and there, and stayed at their gyms. And what they would do is the organization would basically fund like a dormitory, and all the fighters would stay there, right? And so they would, if it was almost like you join a gym, but instead of you paying the gym, they pay you. You're basically a paid professional athlete fighter. The downside was, or some of the downside, it was number one, you were responsible for cleaning the gym, and the more senior fighters would use you as target practice. You just got your ass kicked every day. And when the organization said, okay, this is your next opponent, there was no picking and choosing. It was like, hey, this is who you're fighting. Like, I've only been training 3 months. That guy's been training for 5 years. Like, yeah, whatever, go fight. We pay you. We pay your bills. We're paying you to train. You fight who we say to fight. And that's why a lot of the Japanese fighters have terrible records, even though they're really good fighters. Because for the first 2 dozen fights of their career, they had no training. They were just good. They were just thrown to the wolves, but to the more senior fighters, and they would just get their ass kicked mercilessly. They also did that in the gyms, right? You were just cannon fodder for the more senior fighters. They didn't really teach you anything. You learned by getting your ass kicked.
Yeah.
And after 2 or 3 years of losing every fight you have and getting your ass kicked daily in the gym, you gradually start learning how to fight back, and then you start becoming a good fighter. But by now, your record is 3-20. You know?
Yeah, they
end up being really good fighters taking that pathway.
Now they definitely had some, experienced guys, especially technical guys on the ground. Akira Maeda came out of the Fujiwara pro wrestling system, so he started out with a lot of the works, and eventually, by the time they did the King of Kings tournament, that was the biggest tournament in MMA at the time. So that was amazing stuff. Let's stick with the theme of Japan. What did you think of the Shudo rules? And basically, let's talk about the catch. I like the catch.
I like the concept of it, but it kind of puts your fate, I guess, in the hands of the referee. And if the referee is good and he can truly call a fair catch, then that's fair. But I mean, how do you get somebody caught in a guillotine? How does the referee know how tight that is?
Yeah, yeah.
I
I agree with you. I think it starts with, in Japan, they probably had more educated judges and the refs and stuff. At least they were experienced in their own system, and they were authoritative in implementing it. And I don't think you can do it in the States with these,
right. Yeah, the judges the referees just aren't as good. But yeah, with good referees, I think that can really help make the winner in a decision more distinct.
Yeah, a playing field, evening the playing field too a little bit. Yeah, so
right.
I enjoy the catch. They also had an 8 count on the night, which I think was terrible.
That goes back to the same as boxing. An 8 count just means you're hurt and you're going to stand up and get a moment to shake the cobwebs out and then go back and get hurt some more.
So yeah, I don't know what they were doing with the 8 count, but Shudo's catch, I think, is one of the things that I believe one will be using or uses at this point, and as well as the pride rules. So let me ask you, we talked a bit about fighting couture, and that was in rings. You fought Anderson Silva in Korea. What were the rules there?
That was more like, I guess what you'd say, full MMA rules. So just loves full striking, standing on the ground, grappling, full striking. I don't think they allowed elbows either. I remember hitting him with like some elbows to the body like this, but I think maybe you couldn't elbow him to the head.
Okay. And I asked you earlier, but I'll let you close out the question. How was it like preparing when you're like, okay, 1 week you're going to fight under one rule, another one, the others? Did that lead to any sloppiness or any problems? I know you're real organized in your mind with that sort of stuff, but you probably seen some debacles with other fighters and messing up the rules in those days.
Yeah, I saw other fighters do that a little bit, but it really, again, it was just not a big deal for me, because as a grappler, my goal is to grab you and drag you down and get to the mount and punch you in the face and make you roll over so I can choke you. Like that's a pretty universal game plan for everywhere. And if I can't take you down and you're in my guard, then I'm going to try to sweep you and get on top. And if I can't do that, then I'm going to have to work for a submission from the bottom. And all of those are universally acceptable in whatever rule you want to put it under. So for me, it never really changed my style much, but I could certainly see that affecting some people pretty drastically. Knees, maybe, elbows, maybe, kicks on the ground, maybe. I'm like, I don't care. If you're on the ground, I'm on the ground on top of you. I'm not kicking you in the head. I don't care. So
what about the knees and the knee, like the north-south knees to the head, like what Coleman did to Vovchanchin?
Yep. That's something I think that actually had a pretty big impact on the sport, because again, somebody takes a bad shot and you're on all fours and they're sprawled on top of you, knees to the head are a big game changer. Also, north-south, if you're on top of him in side control or north-south and you're kneeing him in the head, that's a big deal. It changes things a lot. Again, it was never a big weapon for me because I was always trying to get to the mount. So it really wasn't a big concern. Although I did, in my fight with Eugene Jackson in the UFC, I was in side control and I hit him with both an elbow and a knee in the head that changed the fight pretty drastically. So I mean, made him freak out and spaz out to get out of there because I hit him hard.
Right.
So, but yeah, those removing those, I think, changed the sport pretty drastically, and I would say reasonably negatively.
Yeah. So you, as a competitor, you'd prefer dealing with whatever you call it, the edginess of having that available, just to make sure that you've got that option on your end too.
Yeah. And one thing I did like the way some of the Japanese organizations did it. I think it was Pancrase that did it most, but they would have kind of like, they started with some amateurs, but they'd have like A class, B class, and C class amateurs. And so they would gradually implement more open and less restricted rules as you got better. And I think that would work out great. You know, I see some of the other states here will do that. I'll see amateur fights from other states where they're fighting with those slip-on shin pads, you know, like the old pancrase boots, right?
Yeah.
That's good. Going to stop you from getting cut. Maybe say don't kick people in the head when you're standing. Kind of hard for most amateurs to do anyway. And then they would fight with like what are actually training gloves, the big kind of muffin top.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's great as an amateur. And then maybe when you go to the ground, no striking at all. Right. And then the next step is you know, you can strike on the ground, but no elbows or knees. It's only punching when you're on the ground. You know, and then the next level would be, you know, maybe now we're opening up all the rules or whatever, you know, but I think it's great to introduce gradually implementing more dangerous rules to that. But I think if you are prepared for them, they're no big deal. Again, I should say all of this with the understanding that a good referee is important, because if you get clipped and you're hurt and you're no longer capable of defending yourself, a good referee needs to be able to recognize that. But if both guys are, you know, their faculties are there and they're doing well, then yeah, let it go. I'm capable of defending myself from what anybody does to me, no matter what. I mean, even if that means I just end up laying on my back and kicking at you, like I'll be able to defend myself. I may not win the fight, but you're not gonna fuck me up that badly. I'll walk away from the fight. Yeah. And that, to me, that's kind of the point of martial arts, right? That's the point of fighting the way we do. Because I want to know that I can walk out there on the street, and if somebody attacks me or multiple somebody's, I can defend myself. I can, you know, that's the heart of martial arts, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. It's a proving ground, you know.
Yeah. And that's why, you know, some of the more modern rules, I think, kind of start stepping away from that. And in my opinion, too much.
Yeah, you mentioned bare knuckle, and I think, you know, it toes the line because, you know, I think at some point mainstream, you know, it may not be, especially once it gets bloody and stuff. But I also take it to the point where, you know, they, you know, with John L. Sullivan back in the 1880s, they put gloves on and ended the bare knuckle era. But they kept right on doing it, especially in England and, you know, at a lower level. And that survival instinct on the part of the sport, I give it the credit. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because
right.
The absurdity of a power slap has none of that pedigree at all. And that's where I think the line can be drawn as just, that's not combat sports. Do you agree?
Yeah, I agree. That the whole power slap thing is just silly nonsense. I actually saw a little clip from Dan Hardy just yesterday or day before, and he stated it perfectly. He said, like, in the early days of MMA, we were fighting for legitimacy. We were trying to prove that this is a skilled sport. It's not, you know, human cockfighting and all that like it used to be called. But now, like, power slap is a thing. There is literally no defense. In MMA, the better fighter you are, the better your defense is, the less you get hurt. And I'm willing to risk getting hurt, but I don't want to get hurt. I'm not going to let somebody hurt me. Where in power slap, that is the whole point, to let him hurt me and prove that I can take it. That's just fucking stupid.
Yeah, I think that what you pointed out exactly, what Dan, you know, without any type of defense, it isn't competitive. It's not a sport. For
exactly. It's not a sport. It's just people that enjoy watching people get knocked out.
Yeah, and I think that's really what it is, the buzz of seeing people go down, because it, you know, I can't see anything else, but it's crazy. The other part of the slap fighting stuff too is the UFC is putting so much behind it, like it's a sport. But a friend of mine said that was interesting. A friend of mine said, "What if it was kind of like a race, like they were gonna, like, who slaps each other first? That would be way more competitive."
Absolutely.
You know,
or add some element of defense. I don't know how you could do it, but yeah, I mean, add some way of you know, using some strategy or technique or skill somehow to avoid getting hit. You know,
but
like they start with their hands on the table, and on the buzzer you got to slap the guy or something. Yeah, I mean, you're right. At least there's an element of competitiveness to it, and maybe a little bit of an element of strategy to try to, you know, figure it out. I don't know.
Yeah, but I think that was really that's the crushing blow of, you know, I think they first talked the commission's into, MMA is like boxing. Look, there's a promoter. You got a promoter here. There's fighters. You got fighters on the boxing. You got MMA fighters. You got the matchmakers. And look, every one of these is a license you can charge. Oh, so the commission's paid attention. Bare knuckle now is a third license. And that's where they've gotten out of control by now the power slap guys are also charged a license to go do that. And the boxing commission makes money. It's absolutely
that's just a money grab. You get a license to stand there and let somebody hit you. That's just
it's unbelievable. But yeah, you can guarantee that those guys went to Vegas, and had to sign, to get a license and the whole gamut of it. That's how the boxing commission justifies it. So that's really truly ridiculous. And here's the other part of it is, ONE FC is coming to the United States. And I know they haven't exactly hit with a tsunami of media yet, or I don't know if they're going to get as much attention as the UFC off the bat. But these guys, they bring Muay Thai. They also have a grappling league that has some pretty high level grapplers, on the worldwide level. Very exciting stuff. And that to me is a company that likes the sport. They're backing variations of what we have here. And the power slap is an aberration. What do you think of ONE and the grappling leagues? And shouldn't the UFC have backed the grappling league instead of power slap?
Absolutely. Yeah, ONE is doing great. I don't like the kickboxing with MMA gloves. I think it's just kind of silly. But at least it's a version of the sport. It takes a high level of skill. I get that. I can overlook that. I think, I don't know. I'm really not a very macho guy. And so the things that really exude machismo really kind of push me away. And so what's the point of doing that with little gloves? Just to prove that you're tough, right? Yes, it's highly skilled, but why not put on 8-ounce boxing gloves and protect your hands and prevent from poking people in the eye or cutting them with the stitch, whatever. And they wear little gloves because they think it's cool. Unless there's something else I'm missing.
No, they do Muay Thai sometimes in the octagon or in their cage as well. And so it sort of is a mutation or a creation of a different sport. But I think what saves the day is what you said, is that the level the guys are doing it at is really, really elite. They really tapped that market pretty good. And the guys, they understand the show, the show aspect of it too on the Muay Thai side. Those guys are showmen. One of the interesting
and they are highly skilled. They're very impressive and tough as shit. That's the thing. I just
one of the interesting things that one has hit with as they come and they came out in a media press release was they said that the UFC's finish rate is about 38%. And then there's about 70%, making the argument that them and their rule set is more exciting. And they basically use the Pride and Japanese rules. Now, they also have a different spin on the weight cut. Are you familiar with their weight?
Yeah, they're doing the hydration testing, right?
Yeah, they do hydration testing, and basically everybody's a weight class up. So I think, bantamweights are 145, featherweights are 155, and things like that. And, because they're not asking people to do the extreme cut. In fact, they can't. What do you think of that?
Yeah, no, I think that's awesome. Everybody feels the same way about weight cutting. Nobody likes it. We all agree it's unhealthy. We just can't find a way away from it, because I'm going to cut weight if I know I'm going into a division where everybody else is cutting weight. It's the only way I can avoid not giving up a huge advantage. So I don't think anybody actually likes weight cutting. It's just a necessary evil that we all put up with because the other guys are. But I think everybody would give it up if there could be a universal honor system where everybody fought, at their natural weight. I think everybody'd be happier. We would all just move up a weight. But again, there's always other elements there that are a little awkward, because what if you have a guy that's, 207? Is he not allowed to cut 2 pounds to make 205?
Yeah, they have some percentages and availabilities when you get close like that.
Right.
you can
I'm just talking about. I'm just talking about if you were to go in the honor system. That's where it becomes difficult, right? So if you're going to let the guy cut 2 pounds to make 205, what about his buddy that's like, well, I only cut 4 pounds, and then one guy's like, well, I cut 6 pounds, but it doesn't bother me at all. I feel fine, you know. And so then now you get those guys that are kind of stuck in the middle. But no, I agree. I think the hydration testing is awesome. I think it's the way to go. And yeah, finding some fair deviation there, like you can only be a certain percentage out of that weight class or something like that, you know, something reasonable to keep it as safe as possible. I think that's awesome.
How messed up would it be if you were competing and you had to go from UFC system to the one system, like from one fight to the next? Like what kind of effect would that have on you?
Well, again, for me, none, because I'm a grappler. You know, my style is I'm going to try to grab you and drag you to the ground and choke you. For some people, it could be drastically different. The weight class, I assume you would just go up and down what weight class you actually are fighting in, cut weight in the UFC, and not for one.
Yeah, but if a fighter's adjusted and there are like limits to what you can cut, like for example, Eddie Alvarez did very poorly in one when he went over there because I think he ran into a guy that turned out to be bigger because he had the capability. He was actually maybe blown up a little bit and heavy for that. So I think it can open to some confusion. I think they're diverging systems, and if you get signed by one, you can't do the other. You know, you can't
Sure.
signed by UFC, you can't do one, you can't do
Yeah.
one. You know, but I think that that's a like a beta versus VHS type of decision. I would like to see it play itself out and one of those systems come forward and be used. And I prefer it be the one system. I think
Oh, absolutely.
that was their reaction to having a fighter die cutting weight.
Right.
So it was, in Asia, it didn't make as much news on, American media, but they actually lost a fighter during the weight cut and stuff. Well, what's the worst weight cut you've seen? Like, you've been around so long and stuff. Who's the most suffering bastard you ever saw in a weight cut? Was it actually?
Well, I mean, as far as suffering goes, I don't know. You know, it's hard to tell how much people are suffering. I know Travis View used to cut a lot of weight. He would cut from like 245 to make 205.
Yeah,
like, and I mean, like, I don't mean dieting early. I mean, he would sweat out 40 pounds the week of the fight.
Wow. Is it what is that now? Adding to it the brain part. What does that do to you? Why? Yeah.
Yeah, because especially if you're taking any kind of diuretics or anything, because they like when you sweat, when you just work out and sweat, generally the water that you lose is subcutaneous water. It's under your skin first, it's in your muscles, and the last step to get dehydrated is your organs and your brain. It's still bad, but that's last. So if you're taking a real extreme weight cut, then you're getting into that. But if you're taking like diuretics and stuff, you're taking all that water out of your guts first, out of your organs and stuff first. So it's unhealthy. But yeah, that's the point of a weight cut. What's bad about a weight cut is it dehydrates all of your innards. All the stuff that need water that don't rehydrate as fast as your muscles and skin can rehydrate. And your brain obviously really suffers when it's just a big marble bouncing around all dry up in there.
Yeah, and the thing about View was a guy that could make a showing with just about anybody on the planet at 255.
Right.
You just put on 10 more pounds and be a completely legit heavyweight.
Right.
That he was an amazing cut to 205. What did you think of Mark Coleman at 205? Because he was older, and I think the older you get, the worse it is on your body cutting.
It is. Absolutely, yeah. The older you get, the less resistant your body is for drastic change. Or the more resistant it is, rather, the less it wants to. So yeah, it's just hard. I'm sure that weight cut was hard.
What about Pat Miletich? You saw
he's
him.
another one. He fought for a long time at 170, and then he ended up fighting, I believe it was Matt Lindland. He fought him at 185. And even though, Pat walked around at 190, 195 most of the time and would diet down and really tighten up and then cut to 170. But back in the day, that was only like a 10-pound cut, a 12-pound cut. he'd diet from, low 90s to low 80s, and then he's only cutting 10, 12 pounds, which is pretty typical. But then as you get older, the diet's not as easy and you got to be a little sharper. Now you're cutting from 187 to make 170. That's a bit harder. Your body's not, especially after a lifetime of cutting weight. And then it started hurting him a lot more, and just, get old and cranky and just don't want to do it as well.
Yeah, for sure. It's hard. Now, let's get back to on the subject of one and the grappling stuff. You mentioned that the Muay Thai you prefer, more traditional Muay Thai with the gloves, correct, and stuff like that. But what have you seen of the grappling, the young guys that they've been bringing up, the twins and things like that? To talk a little bit about what
I honestly I follow that very sparingly. I really don't watch a whole lot of fighting anymore, except what I see clips come across, on social media. But yeah, the Rutolo brothers, is that their name, right? Those guys are both incredibly good. I'm a huge Gordon Ryan fan. I love his grappling style. I love his social media style. He's kind of a no nonsense, no bullshit kind of guy, and I like that. But yeah, I'm really impressed with the grappling they're bringing out there. I think it's really cool. I love seeing the guys that are not they're aggressive. They're coming after you and they're trying to hurt you. I don't want to see people that are stalling and trying to play for points. I like the guys that want to go after you. So yeah, I'm a real big fan of kind of the new generation of jiu-jitsu guys. Although I don't really like to see, maybe it's just the old man in me, I don't like to see so much emphasis on leg locks, because it kind of goes away from fighting. And granted, it's submission wrestling, so it doesn't have to be fighting. I get that. But I'm like, it changes grappling enough when you take striking away that you can start implementing things like leg locks, a real heavy leg lock game. But it only takes getting kicked in the face once to make you decide you don't want to do those leg locks anymore.
Have you ever seen Gordon Ryan live?
No, not live. I'd love to.
Yeah, so we can end the discussion with Gordon Ryan and maybe it'll tie in the power slap in the UFC. With a guy like Gordon Ryan on the map, like you said, the guy's a social media guy. The guy's taking the sport to a next level. You've got a Michael Jordan type of character here, and a guy who's embracing that.
Yes.
Why go to power slap and not, back a league where, Gordon was going to be, one of the stars or the main star? You got to have competition and things like that, but that's all easier to create than, some slap fighting and stuff.
I don't know.
Do you think
I think
there though? Do you think people are there enough grapplers? What do you think?
I think there are. I mean, grappling is getting to be a very popular sport. But I mean, just like in the UFC, when they first rolled around, there was a handful of really top for the time fighters, and then there was kind of a crop of cannon fodder, and we had to work past that phase. Now everybody recognizes what's necessary. Everybody's training hard in the right disciplines, and now the fighters, for the most part, are top to bottom pretty sharp. And I think the same thing, grappling is even further ahead than where MMA was, where there's a lot of good grapplers out there. There's a lot of them. And so I think there is a big enough pool to draw from to keep exciting matches for a long time, and then pique the interest of the younger guys that are hey, I'm seeing this getting popular. I'm going to really dive into submission wrestling and try to make a career out of that, because that's kind of where MMA came from. People saw money was there, and they're like, okay, I'm gonna really drive into that.
The amazing thing about the new grapplers, the young grapplers that are coming up with that is this is their sport. This is what they grew up doing. So it already looks to be more fluid and more advanced. Yep. But so let me ask you a question. What about the ultimate thing? This is where we come from. When is Gordon Ryan going to do MMA? What is that something that he should be looking at? How would you train him? What would you do?
If I train Gordon Ryan for MMA, I would basically just spar with him a lot. I don't know how good his stand-up is, but for me, what I think all he needs to do is get comfortable with people swinging at him and make sure he can do his takedowns while people are trying to hit him. That's it. That's all he would have to change or add to his game, is just get comfortable with people swinging at you. Because when he gets a hold of people, they're done.
What
So,
do you
and
think?
maybe focus a little less on leg locks, focus more on a strong, his top game, which obviously is amazing. So it'd be really more maybe a strategy change a little bit. And yeah, get comfortable getting hit, and he would do just as well in MMA, I think.
What would be terrible for him would be for him to also have knockout power. Because then,
God, yeah, Jesus,
although it would be beautiful to see, right? But then all of a sudden, it's like Gordon Ryan isn't grappling anymore. So it's like
right?
that's the beauty of it. Now, what do you think of something old fashioned like a Mark Kerr back in the day? No one ever scored a point against Kerr in Abu Dhabi until
Yeah,
Arosa beat him. And he
yeah.
weak there. But what would somebody like Ryan do to Kerr or vice versa? Could Kerr stall him out enough? Do you think?
I don't think so. I think even like in their prime, Kerr in their prime versus Gordon in his prime, which I guess probably still is now. Yeah, I mean, I think in submission wrestling, Gordon would get a hold of his leg and rip it off. And that's the thing. Like, I don't think Kerr was that good. He was a very good wrestler, and he was a very good competitor. He played the rules well. Like, how many people did Kerr submit in his Abu Dhabi career?
No, no, no,
None.
no. He went to points. Yeah,
He wrestled.
yeah.
He was a very good wrestler. He learned enough submissions to avoid it and knew how to stay out of danger. And he wrestled and he played the game well. But
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think there were any of his matches in Abu Dhabi that were entertaining or that were exciting. Right?
No, but
Is Kerr's going to stall? He's going to outpoint you. He's going to take you down and lay in your guard.
I guess the question there is, let's say that steroids aren't an issue, and both guys can come in at whatever they want as their peak. And we know Kerr dabbled, and people think Ryan does too. I don't care to comment on that. You can think either way, but Kerr definitely did. What about Kerr? Is Max most roided? Like,
Doesn't matter.
anybody? Is he still strong enough? You think Ryan's still strong enough to get him? Because
I don't even know if it's strong enough. I think he's good enough. You don't need a whole lot of strength to twist somebody's ankle.
good.
Yeah, and I mean Gordon Ryan is obviously very, very big and strong. I think I watched a video with him last time where he said he was like 220. It's like 6'2", 6'3", 220. That's a big, strong boy.
Yeah.
And
No,
but then
sure.
add on top of that his insane level of jiu-jitsu and yeah. I don't see too many people being able to give him trouble other than like stalling and running and trying to outpoint him. Everything I've ever seen from him, if people commit to trying to beat him, they lose even faster. The only people that last any length of time at all are the people that play defensive and just try to not lose, and then he just has to work a little bit harder to finish them.
Now, I know we said we were going to wrap up. I got one more set of questions since we're traveling the world with rules. What about Sambo? I mean, the bottom line is every once in a while you get a Russian guy that's out of this world, and we know that they produce fighters, consistently at a high level and stuff. And this is part of their basis. They have an understanding of it and stuff, but it's a different type of aggressiveness, and it is some different types of moves in there. Is there a chance that they might have another Alexander Karelin or Fedor, to come out of that system, or is it?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's a million more freaks out there that are just waiting for their chance to shine. But yeah, as far as Sambo goes, I think it's an incredible system. Every system has some weaknesses. Obviously the weaknesses in jiu-jitsu have always been the takedowns. The weaknesses in judo were generally didn't have the greatest, most fleshed out ground game. Sambo, I think it's awesome. It's a strong wrestling style with a decent understanding of submissions. And then when you add, the combat Sambo, which is, adding the striking in there, it's a pretty damn complete style. And there's some weaknesses in there, but there are in every style. But yeah, I think Sambo, again, like we all know now, it's been demonstrated with beyond a shadow of a doubt that wrestling is king of the hill for building a strong mentality and a competitive mindset, just to drive, go, never quit, right? Nothing touches wrestling in that regard. And Sambo has that. It has that mentality as well as a good, a good cross-section of all the techniques. Some submissions, some striking, obviously great wrestling and takedowns. Yeah, I think Sambo's incredible.
Now you're in Utah. Nowadays, have you run across Walt Bayless? Like he's an old.
Yeah, when I actually first moved out here, the gym that I was training at was with a couple of his main students. Yeah.
Talk about him because he's one of those legendary guys. I mean, I've heard, he's a guy who could do a one arm pull up at 250 pounds kind of thing.
Yeah. So I met him a couple of times, but I never trained with him. When I came out here, he'd already kind of moved past that stage. So I met him a couple of times. He's a nice guy. But yeah, I heard all those same stories, but I can't confirm or deny any of them. I know the guys that he trained are all good. They're good grapplers, definitely.
That's good, incredible stuff. Well, Jeremy, I want to thank you a lot for joining me again. We had a good discussion on just the rules and just a big blast of history all over the place. But I think we got to accomplish what we want to do. Just talk about that. There's still variations, a couple of things that may still need to be played out here before there's a worldwide uniform system. I think the idea of C class, B class, A class should be considered in some of the things that you point out. You're obviously one of the people who, if there's going to be change, somebody should come and ask you what the hell you want. You're qualified. Yeah. So I appreciate deeply you joining us here at the MMA Museum, man. Thank you.
Well, thank you, man. Guys, thanks for having me. It's always fun to catch up and kind of reminisce a bit. So I'm more than happy to come on anytime.
Cool. And I'm checking out. Thank you, and I'll see you soon, Jeremy.
All right.